أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى اللهم على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to our session. Inshallah, we're gonna start on we're reading the flashes actually, the 25th flash, which is a treatise on the message for the sick, is entitled. And we're gonna be working together on the 7th remedy. So we've been coming along for a few remedies, as the author puts it. And just to recap a little bit, let's go again to see the verses on how the author starts. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Those who say when afflicted by calamity, to God do we belong, and to him is our return. Quran chapter 2, verse 156. So to those who say when afflicted by calamity, and this is something the author has translated as, to God do we belong, and to him is our return. And then the following verses, who gives me food and drink? And when I am ill, it is he who cures me. Quran chapter 26, verse 79 to verse 80. Now, it's interesting how, in general or in the, commonly in the culture, we normally, when this kind of verses are recited or thought about, when you hear the death of someone or something really disastrous kind of happens, so this inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, to God do we belong and to him is our return, that portion of the verse is kind of recalled. But at least in this, the way this author kind of is presenting it, and if you're familiar with the author's work, the way what he focuses on is mostly every moment of ours is something that is important that we need to consider. And your last moment, if you think about it, where is it? It's gone. So where did it go? It goes back to whoever presented it to you. So this is a verse which is very applicable to each and every individual, and that we can relate to in our practical lives on a regular, continual basis, that we can say that, hey, whatever is happening, all these events, all these situations I'm going through in my life journey are coming from him, and I have to return them back to me. So there's an onus on me to acknowledge this, realize that this event is being presented to me, and I have to return that event back to him. So in this case, as the author uses this here, in when you are afflicted by calamity, to God do we belong, and to him is our return. And this section is basically expounding on that, what the author, how he understands, like in terms of when anybody goes through sicknesses or any situation that is unpleasant or that is physically taxing on someone. So how do we reconcile with going through those situations? And then there's also these portions of who gives me food and drink, and when I am ill, it is he who cures me. So we kind of extensively talked on how the illness that we go through is a creation. Somebody is giving that to us. It's not something we can disregard. And the health, which we take mostly for granted, is also given by the same being. So it's not something that I can take ownership of, but health is given to me by the one who gives me existence. So now if he makes me ill from time to time, And the author kind of goes through that in the sections that, hey, are you complaining for that? That whoever gives you health is the one who's kind of giving you sickness. So do you complain about that when the health from the beginning has not been yours to claim ownership over? So whoever is the one who is in charge of my existence, my health, who is my Lord, I would say, or we can say God, do I, realize that everything that I have is coming from Him, so including my health that I am, using and benefiting from. So I need to recognize that all these things, including my health, is coming from Him. So a major portion of his remedies is to realize this part that, your health has been given to you, and you as a human being should stop complaining. But the interesting part that I found that in all of his remedies is something very, he puts it, the author is presenting it in a very strange kind of way. He says, first of all, he's saying, like in the previous, some of the previous remedies, he said, don't be, anxious, but be patient. There's a lot of benefit in your being sick. And another place he again says, instead of complaining, you should be very thankful. And these are some of the things that, just took me by surprise. I'm like, this is very strange how, the concept of sickness, I don't think anybody is, really pleased. I know, because as a physical kind of sickness, yes, nobody wants it. That's true, and we should always look for the cure the way, however we would like to. But in terms of the existence or the creation of the sickness, is there something that's something for me to ponder over, to think about, and to really wonder about, like, how do I make this experience, which one side, in the culture, they may present it as something, oh, I was really sick that day, I couldn't do this, and I couldn't go out and do my things. But then here, this opportunity is the way the author puts it from the Quranic lens. It shows that sickness is a blessing that you need to actually be happy about, kind of, in terms of, because there is a benefit for you to realize something, and it is purposefully fulfilling its mission. So anything in creation shows that there is a particular purpose that is there for me to benefit from. So that is kind of the, to bring the perspective of what section we are reading in terms of the, the remedies for all the sicknesses that one goes through. So now let's go and read what the seventh remedy is. So let's see. Yeah, and at any point, if anybody wants to make a comment, you are free to put it on the chat, or you are welcome to raise your hand as well. And inshallah, we will take it from there. So let's go and read the seventh remedy. O sick person who has lost the pleasures of health, your illness does not spoil the pleasure of divine bounties. Your illness does not spoil the pleasure of divine bounties. On the contrary, it causes them to be experienced and increases them. So your illness does not spoil the pleasures of divine bounties. On the contrary, the illness causes them to be experienced. So the illness causes the divine bounties to be experienced and increases them. For if something is continuous, it loses its effect. So if something is continuous, it loses its effect. The people of reality even say that things are known through their opposites. For example, if there were no darkness, light would not be known. If there was no darkness, light would not be known and would produce no pleasure. If there were no cold, heat could not be comprehended. If there were no hunger, food would afford no pleasure. If there were no thirst of the stomach, there would be no pleasure in drinking water. If there were no sickness, no pleasure would be had from good health. So if there were no pleasure would be had from good health. The all-wise creators decking out man with truly numerous members and faculties, to the extent that he may experience and recognize the innumerable varieties of bounties in the universe, shows that he, capital H, he wants to make him aware of every sort of his bounty and to acquaint him, the individual, the person, with them, and to impel the individual to offer constant thanks. Since this is so, he will give illness, sickness, and suffering the same as he bestows good health and well-being. I ask you, if you had not suffered this illness in your head or in your hand or stomach, would you have perceived the pleasurable and enjoyable divine bounty of good health of your head, hand, or stomach and offered thanks? For sure, you would not have even thought of it, let alone offering thanks for it. You would have unconsciously spent that good health on heedlessness and perhaps even on dissipation. All right, so these are the two paragraphs of this remedy. So let's go over the first paragraph and see what the author is saying. And he says, okay, O sick person who lost the pleasures of health. Yeah, when you're sick, you kind of, it feels that way that, hey, you know, you cannot really enjoy what you were doing before because now maybe you might be having a fever in bed and you cannot get up and do the activities that you would like to do. So at that moment, you do realize something that, hey, you know, all this time, you know, I was enjoying and, you know, doing whatever I can and with the health that that I have, but I have to see that that health was given. And now now that I'm kind of sick, you know, that makes me wonder about all those activities that I'm doing. So let's go along with this and see. I will probably ask a question that I would like to understand further with all of you. So he said, your illness does not spoil the pleasure of divine bounties. On the contrary, the illness causes those pleasures to be experienced and increases those pleasures. Now I'm kind of wondering how does this illness make the pleasure and divine bounties actually increases them? What's going on here? Because practically, I don't think anybody can physically see that, hey, you know, I'm suffering here, and now this author is saying, hey, you know, from this sickness, you know, that is given to you, your pleasures are actually you're experiencing them so you can experience the pleasures, and actually they are increased. So please feel free to raise your hand. I would love to hear your comments. And I think Hamim has typed the question also. So Hale, please go ahead.
Welcome. What I took from this is things are known through their opposites, and I think the important thing is known. In other words, consciousness or conscious awareness, and that awareness, Nursi. I always go back to Nursi's. I think that's a 4-step method, or a 4-step process where he says, I think it's reflection, acknowledgement, thankfulness, and appreciation, or something like that, or reflection, acknowledgement, thankfulness, and gratitude, as the way he puts forth to follow. And the first step is reflection and acknowledgement. And the only way to know something is by reflecting on that thing you're thinking about or experiencing. And the only way that happens is through opposites. In other words, as he says, light would not be known without darkness and would produce no pleasure. So connecting reflection and acknowledgement, or knowing, to sort of thankfulness and appreciation and gratitude, because you have to think about, what are you thankful for or appreciative of? You can't be appreciative of something you don't know. So if there was no illness, so to speak, or a lack of health, or a diminished state of health, because darkness or illness have no true or real existences. They're just your a perception of the diminishment of something real, like health or light, that doesn't match your expectations. If that didn't occur, there would be nothing to reflect on, to know, and therefore to be thankful and appreciative of. And he goes on to say, if there were no thirst of the stomach, there would be no pleasure in drinking water. If there were no sickness, no pleasure would be had from good health. So that is, in a way, it's the only way in which man can know. Otherwise, he takes himself as God, so to speak, or in other words, the source of health, the source of pleasure from within himself, the source of sustenance and health, the maybe two of the most important things that man cherishes, which relate to, his existence. If he knew anything, he would know himself as God. Otherwise, without this demonstration of opposites within the universe.
Thank you, Sohail. That was very good. I appreciate your comment. And I was going to go to the opposites also, how we realize everything through the opposite, and your 4-step process, or maybe 2-step process, in terms of your reflection and acknowledgement, and then being thankful for it, and then actually expressing your gratitude to the one presenting, I would say. So that was pretty good. Thank you for that. And I saw there was another hand, because I'm thinking also in terms of how the author says, you'll be experiencing these pleasures and they will be increased. So it seems to me that the author is not talking about, some quantity wise, your pleasures, you'll be experiencing more pleasures. But I think there is an experiential and more realizing and qualitative kind of sense of the increases were being used here. But I would be happy to hear otherwise. And I know there is also somebody else with you, Sohail. I think Asifa had raised her hand. If she wants to go, please, I would give her the opportunity, and then you can go after her. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Yes, I was actually going to go along the same lines that Sohail has actually described as opposites. I was just gonna add a little more to it in terms of course, if there was not illness, I would say human nature wise, like if everything was just given to us, like all these bounties constantly on a daily basis, every single moment, I like this is how I think of it. Like we would definitely take things for at some point we'll take it for granted and we would expect the future will entail the same thing. So there's I feel like there's not mm, a greater appreciation there until suddenly all these bounties suddenly stop. I'm not saying totally, but from our expectation, it stops or it lessens. Then we go back and realize, oh wow, I was given so much, and we truly then go back to who was the provider who has given this to us. Um, I'm sorry about the background noise. That was pretty much what I had to add. Thank you.
You can continue. We love that background noise as well. if if you still want to continue, but thank you. You touched upon the phrase where the author says, "For if something is continuous, it loses its effect." And along the lines, as you were mentioning, that if you're never get sick or you don't, and as Suhail was also highlighting about not experiencing the other side or the opposite side of things, then you will never get to appreciate or recognize that part. And I know Suhail had his hand up, so Suhail, please go ahead.
Well, kind of what you both said. If you think about just theoretically the position or situation in which there were no opposites. Um, so one had perfect health, just as it is. That's who you would be, or um, you would not feel the pangs of hunger, so to speak, at all. Not even one iota. There is no such thing as pleasure, and there is no because pleasure derives from being thankful and appreciative and showing gratitude. So you can't like have experiencing pleasure wouldn't it wouldn't mean anything because no pleasure comes from the existence of opposites, not from I have health. What does it actually mean? Like if you just had perfect health, it wouldn't mean anything to you. It just would be the state of things. I don't know if that makes sense, but there'd be nothing to appreciate because you wouldn't have any notion or idea of what health is. Only through its lack of or diminishment do you know what it is and therefore become appreciative of it. So there is no pleasure, so to speak. Like somebody may say, "Oh, well, couldn't I experience a lot of pleasure if I just had it?" Well, you wouldn't even know what pleasure is. There wouldn't be any such thing in existence because you wouldn't. It only derives from appreciation and knowing what you've been given, not what you not what you simply have, but what you've been given. And I think that's important.
Yeah, thank you, Suhail. That makes sense, perfect sense, actually. So one cannot really appreciate or perceive anything if they don't see the opposite of it. Because as you were saying, if I don't experience, for example, heat and cold is only something what I experience, I would never know what coldness is. I would just be, you know, I wouldn't know what that is and just question it at all. Or if I'm always satiated and there's no need for me to eat anything or to fulfill the hunger. There's an interesting aspect to our being that time to time, we are always, our stomach calls us, hey, there's a hunger that we go through and experience, which is really beautiful if you think about it, because that's the only one of the ways that we can understand what, satisfaction is, what provision is, what, being full is, rather than being on an empty stomach. So everything in the universe is made in that way where the opposite makes the thing known. And we will talk more on this, but there's a hand up from Syra. So Syra, please go, and then we can take Beza. Thank you.
Sorry. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the wonderful descriptions, and I'd just like to add on like my interpretation. So when we talk about, you know, comparing the opposites, right? I feel like Allah created it that way for us like humans because we have such a limited capacity of understanding, you know, like the divine and how He's created everything. We have to, you know, put in perspective, like, why does this exist, or why do we need to understand it this way? So like it just kind of reminded me of this hadith that mentioned they are prophets, then they are the next best, then the next best, meaning the people who are the best of creation, right? These are the people who were given the most trial. I'm sorry, let me just say it from the beginning. Sayyid ibn Waqas reported that Prophet ﷺ said, which people are tested the most severely? Why would Allah test the most blessed prophets and then the Sahabas, right? They're supposed to be the ones who are promised Jannah and whatnot, right? So I think they are the best examples for us to understand what it's like to not have. So like what's his name? Brother Sahel said about like if we had perfect health, we have nothing to be thankful for. You know, we have nothing to compare it to, like, you know, what it's like to not have. And all of these the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was an orphan, right? He didn't have the blessing of, you know, two parents, and you know, he had very little clothing all his life. Like he had very little, right? And I feel like Allah just creates all of these, even the remedies themselves, so we can all like understand them at our capacities. We can fathom the greatness of, you know, of what we do have. It just makes us more appreciative. It's so I agree with you from, you know, the very beginning when you said that inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun. It's supposed to be a good thing. It was never meant to be something negative. Like even when someone passes away, when you lose something, saying that and understanding what that, you know, that quote, I mean that ayah means, yeah, I guess that's all I want to say. Like it's supposed to just remind us that, you know, we are in a better state than we think we are. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your comment. Basically, as you said about everybody is going through teachings, and we learn from the prophets. They are our teachers, as you mentioned and highlighted. And I am going through my journey right now and being presented with all different experiences, including illness and health. So I have to also take their example, learn from them, and also evaluate on myself using their guidelines on seeing the existence side of things. So thank you for that. And I would take Beza and then give the mic back to Syra. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the comments so far. I was thinking about, you know, in regards to our discussion from last week as well, and tying in with today's topic, things or experiences are justified in terms of what they look to, regardless of how, you know, quote unquote, little or big amount of pain or suffering I may experience. Because if the end result is absolute or ultimate, it doesn't really compare. And at the same time, along the lines of what we've been discussing today so far, I cannot know something without having some sort of contrast. And opposites are usually the degree at which this contrast is at the utmost level, which really attracts my attention. Otherwise, you know, I don't have to be, you know, about to die in order to become aware of the fact that I'm alive or given life. That's why sickness, I guess, could be like a middle gray ground for that sort of contrast, because there's still contrast nonetheless. So I was thinking about this idea of pleasure from getting to know something through its opposite. But I also was thinking about how, in and of itself, just because I can get to know the state of being healthy through experiencing sickness, it doesn't necessarily give me pleasure in and of itself. And maybe I should use pleasure with like a capital P, or absolute pleasure. And the reason being is because I know that even if I have been given health again after that period of sickness, I know that that health may be replaced with sickness again. So I think initially, while it is necessary for me to have this sort of contrast or experiencing the opposite of something to get to know the opposite of that thing, to even draw my attention to it. So I guess with the first step, like acknowledge, right, even the existence of the state of being healthy is different than getting to a state of receiving even pleasure from the unpreferable state of being. Because I don't think I will ever willingly want to experience sickness. And that's not what the author is saying anyway, as far as I understand it. But just the realization that health and sickness exist in and of themselves can be a sort of curse by itself, because it doesn't really take me anywhere other than that reminds me of the fact that I'm needy and things are happening to me outside of my control. That's why in the sentence that Awesome had highlighted, where the author says, "Your illness does not spoil the pleasure of divine bounties." I think that one of the key words here is divine bounties, right? Not just the state of the bounty, the health itself, but divine as in what that health looks to. Otherwise, I will never prefer sickness ever, I don't think. But yeah, I will never prefer sickness, but insofar as what that sickness looks to or reminds me, or that state of awareness, then I can still, even though I may not like it, I can receive a sort of pleasure from that state of being. And one example that comes to mind, although it might not be too great, and I think I may have said it before too, like as a kid, I used to like being sick, because during that time, I used to feel or experience my mother's compassion to a higher degree than I normally would. So while, being sick made me stay in bed all day, I was very, very happy. And I was, perhaps you could say, experiencing a lot more pleasure than I normally would have been when I was not sick. So that state of pleasure coming about, or being given not just in the recognition or acknowledgement of the two states of being through their opposites, but what they look to, or the divine aspect of it.
Thank you, Hbeza. That was very good. I think you kind of triggered some comments on the chat box. And from Mariam Ozdemir, and also Fariha is also chiming in, I guess. Interesting. So I don't know, Mariam, what do you want to say something? What is your take on this? I know Hbeza kind of highlighted the part about the contrast being necessary, and although nobody voluntarily wants to put themselves into the position of sickness or some unpleasant kind of situation, nobody voluntarily, but we have to see that everything is, there is someone who is presenting these to us. So this source, our Lord, who is in charge of us, who is giving us health, who is giving us our existence, is the one presenting those situations. So in that, yes, at the moment, yes, I don't like it, but then this is what the reevaluation of my take on how do I evaluate this sickness now that I have this understanding of who the owner is, who is the one who gives me health. Do I re-examine my take on the apparent? Do I take that as the education for me that I'm learning from this sickness? Is it something that is now benefiting me rather than just making me in a bad mood or miserable? So that is what I have to go and take. And Mariam Ostemir left your hand up, so please go ahead.
I don't really have anything new to add, but I can just touch on the points that sort of really popped out to me. So the thing that was really big, I think so far was so the universe was sort of made in a way so you don't know, how do I explain this? So you can't know what something is without having a contrast to it. So if you're healthy, you don't realize that healthiness until you have a sickness. And so if you're hungry, then you don't realize when you were full before that hungriness. And so instead of when you're sick, most people, they're pretty miserable when they're sick, but instead of feeling that miserableness, you can use that to connect with your creator, trying to find what goodness can come out of that, what lesson you need to learn from that, and how okay, wait. So through sickness, you can connect with your creator by what you've done lately and stuff like that. I need to gather my thoughts up a bit more though.
Thank you, Mariam. That was very nice. And I think Faria has a comment. Let's hear from Faria now.
Pretty much in line with what Mariam shared about how I get to know about things by experiencing its opposite. And that's pretty much the crux of the matter as presented by the author, which you all pinpointed and touched upon. So it's really actually amazing in terms of how I experience creation in general, or how I interact with the universe. So yeah, like you were saying, that if I get to know about the giver of health by experiencing sickness, otherwise I wouldn't even recognize the giver of health if I'm just keep going with a continuous monotonous routine. Then there won't be anything to do. As a matter of fact, I won't be even utilizing my free will. And the author also mentions it somewhere, for if something is continuous, so on the screen Hamim is highlighting, if something is continuous, it loses its effect. And yeah, it's just that, if there's a water flow coming in, and I start taking it for granted, suddenly somebody turns off the faucet. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what? I'm supposed to be getting water here. But then that makes us question all this time that I take everything for granted. So I don't know what we may seem as an interruption, or just as a sudden change from what I am accustomed to. is actually very purposeful and meaningful, because that's how I get to know the source of existence of anything. So thank you.
Thank you for the comments. So, I find it very strange also how the author is, making us realize. Because personally, I don't think anybody, at least me, myself, speaking for myself, I never looked at, the creation of sickness in with this aspect, and how important it is actually to go through the experience. Actually, it's really important to go through the experience, because always being in a healthy kind of is something I would miss out on a lot of things if I am always in a state of health. So this dynamic nature of the universe and of my being is a very, very interesting kind of phenomena that is, every individual is going through. Thank you for that. So if there is any more comment by anyone, anybody wants to say anything on the first paragraph, you are welcome to raise your hand. Okay, HBSI, go ahead.
This is more of a sub point, I think, to what's been discussed, but I was also just thinking about, even in the experience of the opposites, it's never really the opposite of something that I experience. So I don't experience death itself to become aware of life. I always experience something in between. I'm not saying I don't die. Eventually, we all will, and people have died and are dying. But whatever experience it is, it's always in the gray scale. It's always in the middle. Something that I'm experiencing, and at different degrees. But never 100% the opposite of whatever it is. Whereas health, I do experience 100% health, but I think the fact that I always experience the lack of health in degrees is just another indication to me that even the way in which I'm being given the good news of what this sickness looks to, even the way in which this is happening is so mercifully done upon me, on me. Otherwise, I'm not shocked. It's always degrees in ways that I can handle it, or in ways that I can digest it. It's never I don't know. It's never like a complete slap in the face that makes you turn 180 degrees or something. It's like a pinch, or it's like a reminder, or it's like a snap, or it's something that attracts my attention, which is basically what it's supposed to do. And it causes my gaze to look at or it's pushing me to look at the meaning in it, or what it points to, but never in such a mean way, or a violent way, or a threatening way. It's always done so pleasantly, I guess, in terms of if I'm in terms of me experiencing it within its degrees.
Thank you, HBSI. You did bring up an interesting point about the degrees, sort of like a yardstick, or a comparison kind of tool in terms of when you say experience of sickness or health. And in another section, I know the author, or not here in this section, but when he talks about the opposites, he does point out about the degrees. That, for example, here he says, if there were no darkness, light would not be known. But he kind of, makes the point that darkness is nothing but the absence of light. So what we experience in terms of light is through the degrees. And if there is a lack of light, we probably will call it darkness. Same thing with our health. There is the degrees that we are going through, and it's always the way the existence. Health is also something, a naming thing that we give to that state that we are in, but a lack of that health is what we call as illness or sickness. So that is another interesting aspect to our, the way the things are existing. And it is through the degrees, as H. Beza was pointing out, that, and looking at those degrees, that we are able to make sense and understand, what the reality of this existence is that we're experiencing. And we're really learning how and get to know, the, with the variations and the constant, change that is happening in the universe, that, there must be a source that, is presenting all this to us. And I see that there is a comment from Mariam. Mariam, would you like to read that comment?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I said nothing has no meaning. Everything points to our creator. What I meant by that was, so we were connecting everything with sickness so far. So I'm gonna use that as an example. But if you're sick, you aren't sick just because you're sick. So you're sick because, as Hatice Abla said, it's like a little pinch reminding you that your creator is who gives you health, and sickness reminds you about health. And the second part was everything points to our creator. So if you see, say, a beautiful deer, you would immediately say, MashaAllah. That deer's beauty is just a little bit of what our creator is capable of. And its beauty points to our creator immediately. And that's what I meant by my comment.
MashaAllah, thank you very much, Mariam. Beautiful comment. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think there's some mathematical comment, mathematics Sohail is doing. So Sohail, would you like to elaborate what's going on with your comment and explain to us, please? Thank you.
Oh, I mean, it was just comment on Hatice Beza's analogy, in that, never truly experience zero, because zero doesn't exist. So you never experience 0% health in this life. I guess, so to speak, if you did, you'd be dead. But you never also experience 100% about anything, because 100% is perfection of something. And the world is in between the two. And because we experience to be 99 or 99.99 or 98 or 97 or 50 or 40, whatever, however which way you perceive it to be, you realize that you don't want zero or the non-existence of something. So that makes it pleasurable. And on the other hand, you desire the perfection of something, or 100%, which looks towards eternity. So that is how one sort of begins to appreciate what they've been given, or begin given by divine source, I would say.
Thank you, Sohail. So what I understood, and correct me also, so zero is what is analogous to basically non-existence. And 100 is what the analogous to absolute, would you say? And we always experience something in between. We can never experience zero, non-existence. We cannot experience absoluteness. Correct me, please, and I'm trying to decipher this. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say 100% is absolute and for humans or man, but perfection of something. So the perfection of something being something that's eternal. So that's how I would phrase it. But knowing that we want the perfection of health, whatever that is. Maybe I don't even know what that is, but I know I want it, and I want it eternally. Does not occur in this life but because I don't have it, I know I want it, as Norsi points out in his writing. And that brings pleasure, because you know you've been given something that you could honestly say you had nothing to do with it. And on another hand, you could say, did you even deserve it, so to speak? And that itself brings a pleasure, because, or divine pleasure, because even if you are ill, it's sort of a message that the one who gives health is the one who's taking care of you. Now, interesting. It's an interesting paradox, but it sort of reorients your perception of what illness is, or the lack of anything that you like is. So, if you think things happen on account of themselves, then the absence of something is not pleasurable. It's the opposite of it, or it's painful.
Thank you, Sohail. Yeah, thank you very much. So really, so I thinking about this. So the pleasure is really in your, that I get, the pleasure is in my recognition of who the absolute source is. That's in my, that connection that once I realize and establish, you know, in my state of being, you know, whatever I'm going through, but if I direct all that, those feelings and my senses, you know, to where they are coming from, and, you know, contemplate, reflect, and then realize who that source is, that's, and belonging to that source is where then I will have that pleasure in my being. So it's all has to do with me, you know, using how I realize and how, what my perception and is based on the events that I see. And I see H. Beza has her hand up, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, I guess I think the points that have been brought up are fair, but I think, you know, as far as how much of like the ultimate 100% that I can actually experience within a created limited form, I experience 100% of that. So it's not like an absolute 100%, but as far as my experiences are concerned, like when I look at my own life, majority of it has been spent in good health rather than sickness. But I do take the point about what's been said about, you know, like 100% looking to the perfection of the quality, which would mean that it's unending, which is not something that I can experience physically here. Having said that, or before I go there, and you know, when I experience, physically speaking, when I experience the lack of health, then I rarely experience like 0%, which would be death, or if you don't want to go to the absolute non-existence, I could say I rarely experience anything close to like 0.00001% or something. Having said that, I may still experience 0% in my perception or my attitude of things, without really, to some extent, without physically experiencing the reality of it. And I think this is also another mercy, because without truly going into non-existence, I can experience the pain of non-existence, or I can, in my attitude, even though it has no reality, I can experience non-existence. And that's perhaps as close as I can ever get to non-existence, but that also being a mercy as well, because it just because through it then I recognize, hey, I really 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 dislike this 0%, which is like the true zero, which is non-existence, and I really have this tendency or preference towards 100%, which is the perfection of these qualities, of existence, of permanence, of happiness. So I think the fact that I can experience 0% in my perception, and I mean the ultimate zero, Whereas physically, I may never ultimately experience 0% because that's non-existence. But in my perception, I can. And that being also a sort of mercy, or being mercifully given to me, because then I can, it pushes me to take or question so that I can try to avoid truly, fully experiencing 0%, even, physically speaking, if that kind of makes sense, if I didn't make a mess of this thing.
Thank you, Ishbeza. So right now I'm experiencing existence. So I think we need to focus on our existence. That is, we are going through our journey, inshallah. And I do understand, like, once you experience existence, I don't think it makes sense to, really go into the non-existent, because, hey, I'm living here, I'm existing, and this is what I'm going through. I'm going through the different phases, experiences, stages in my existence, different experiences. So sometime maybe I may not feel well, and the other time I am in good health. Another time I may be in kind of, less optimal health. So I always go through this journey within the spectrum is the better word, I would say, of existence. And that is what I can really talk about and reflect on. So thank you. I appreciate that. And then I think if anybody wants to say anything on this paragraph before we move on to the next paragraph, so I will take some comments. So Faria has her hand up, then we'll take Suhail. Thank you.
So somebody brought up a comment. I think it was Mariam Ostermer, or I don't know, but it was interesting that I do not get to know about the existence of anything by experiencing the opposite. So yeah, that's how things are set up in this universe. And also at the same time, how we pretty much say in these discussions, or just in general, it may seem very basic and fundamental that everything carries a meaning. Everything is a messenger. So if I'm given health, it is a message. But do I read that message? I'm likely not to read it. When illness is given existence, do I read that message? Absolutely yes, because I do not like illness. I dislike it. And so when I'm more inclined to read that message. And when you are reading a message, it has been sent by a conscious sender. And so you get to acknowledge and know the sender of that message. So the point I'm trying to bring in is that everything is a message in existence. I'm happy at one moment, the next moment I'm not that happy, I get upset at something. So I think it's also, to me at least, it's helping me recognize the sender of the messages, because I'm more inclined to open the mail when it's something that requires a little more alertness on my end. So I wanted to share that.
Sure, thank you, Fariha. And I know Suhail had his hand up. So Suhail, go ahead. And I know there's a comment. We'll get to the comment once Suhail has the mic.
It was just what Khadija Beza said, her comment. Going back to the beginning of the seventh remedy, it says, your illness does not spoil the pleasure of divine beauties. On the contrary, bounties, on the contrary, causes them to be experienced and increase them. It's interesting if you think about it. If you experience one illness, you are sort of, man is fine-tuned or programmed in such a way that he desires the perfection of something, such that if he's given anything less, even like one atom's weight or one iota less, he would be willing to sell everything, or even the whole universe, ransom the whole universe, for that one thing. Let's say in this case, health. And in a way, that is sort of demonstrating, how much man appreciates divine bounties and therefore derives a pleasure from those divine bounties, in that they're so valuable that not even the limits of the material world would be equal to their value, because the non-existence of something, even if my perceived non-existence of health is 1%, like I have 99% health, let's say, whatever that is, or maybe, that is so painful. Just the idea or thought of non-existence without actually experiencing it per se, truly, really uncovers how much you appreciate and value those divine bounties, and in a way you derive pleasure from them. So it makes you completely cognizant and aware of what you've been given, which I think, as Teacher Beza points out, is that man in his life rarely, in the majority of people, I would say, do not experience something so dramatic or drastic in their life. Things happen, but they're rare occurrences, and just maybe those several rare occurrences that happen in one's life, they're dramatic enough to man's perception, because they turn your face towards the notion or idea of non-existence of something, and in a way recalibrate, or I wouldn't even say recalibrate, uncover and sort of make you come to your senses about what you value and how much you value those things that you've been given.
Yeah, thank you, Sohail. So let me try to understand one thing. So once you when you go through your experiences, you experience health, you experience happiness, enjoyment, love, compassion, mercy, all those things. When you get a taste of it, you experience it. Yeah, you want to continue with them. You want to experience them forever. You want to get that, continuous experience of that. So those things are a taste for me, that this is something that my human side wants and looks for. So in the case of health here, yes, my human side looks for, yes, I want to be healthy and I want to continually stay healthy. But in this created world, I cannot get it. That's not the case for me in this created world. I do get sick. I do go through difficulties, hard times. And it goes also to, I remember from last week of, the sixth remedy, where, the author was saying that, hey, if this world was eternal, if this was the only world, then, you go through all these experiences, including death, then I would definitely pity you, because, there's no hope or sign of eternity in this world. So this world is only for me to recognize and realize that I look for the eternal aspect of things, and I look for that source that can, who has given me the taste and experience and love for these things that I like, I enjoy. And that is what I am going after. That is the source I need to attach my being to. And I will let H. Beza talk based on her comment if she wants to add anything.
Nothing much really. I was just thinking about this backtracking a little bit, but the existence of the dislike of non-existence looks to the existence of the love of existence. So, in other words, the fact that I am so, afraid of, or I dislike, or the fact that, even just the idea of not having these things that I like permanently is so disliked by me that that experience in and of itself also looks to the love of the permanence of those things. So I know Miriam had sent me a question about my comment. Does that kind of answer your question as well, Miriam, with the permission of the moderator? Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any other person who wants to comment, say something? Okay, Faria, please go ahead.
Yeah. I personally am not much fond of technical wording, so I like I don't know, whoever brought the notion of a spectrum. So when I experience something, I'm experiencing existence. So when I'm healthy, perhaps I'm not conscious of the spectrum of my existence, but when I'm afflicted with some illness, I think then the barometer sort of increases, because now I realize existence in general, or the one that gives existence to illness is the same one that provides existence to health. So now it makes more sense to me how the author is walking us through in terms of getting to know about existence, or me being conscious of my existence in every flavor, taste, shape, form that I experience. I'm more inclined to acknowledge this existence, recognize the source of existence of these qualities that I'm experiencing, and then I appreciate everything more. And then I'm able to, return, be more grateful to the one that's providing it. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. All right, that was beautiful, actually, with all the friends participating, expressing their opinions and comments. So what about the second paragraph? I think we touched some points from there also. What does anybody maybe it's a question, what is the first sentence? That the all-wise creator's decking out man with truly numerous members and faculties, to the extent that he may experience and recognize the innumerable. That's a pretty long sentence. Innumerable varieties of bounties in the universe. Yeah, so what is the decking out of man with these members and faculties? How do we, maybe Mariam, would you care to make us understand what do you understand from this particular sentence, decking out man with the members and faculties? If you don't, that's fine also. We can talk about it all together. Yeah, so let's go over this paragraph. And I think because the author also has in that paragraph a very good sentence that each and every one of us can ask ourselves. But this decking out man with truly numerous members and faculties, if we look at our human, our being, ourselves, you see, hey, look, you have certain things in your physical side, and you have certain things in your human side. You have eyes and ears and tongue, which you taste a lot of different kind of food, and you hear a lot of different sounds, you see a lot of different things in the universe, you touch, your five senses, you feel. So you go all through that with your physical side, and then you have your, looking at the physical side, you go through certain, meaning side of it, like your human, when you look at a flower smiling at you, you're like, yeah, you look at the colors, the smell of the flower, it touches you on your human side, where you are, engaging and having a conversation or communication, so to speak, with the flower that you're looking at. Or if you're outside looking at the birds and experiencing how, their flight and their wings, you kind of are, communicating with that side of the the bird. Your eyes see it, but then your human side, your feelings, they wonder at, wow, look at that, how this being, this creature kind of spreads and then just glides, goes through, using, with the wind and from one place to the other. Look at all those different kind of feathers that, it flaps, and it has certain, wings that it goes through. So the human being is able to read and understand. So these are the members and faculties that the human being is given. And who gave this? Did I make my senses of touch or feeling, or did I give myself the eyes, or this power of vision, of the power of hearing? Am I the maker or the giver of those things? Can I say that? Or somebody? So that's why it says somebody, or the all-wise creator, has decked out, has given to man all these faculties and members. And for what is the purpose for me for being given all those things? Why am I made in such a way with all these things? What am I to do with that? So this is what in the second paragraph, the author kind of takes the human journey into a more experiential journey, where you are, you go and realize that, hey, you have this ability within yourself in the human being. You have all the tools you need to recognize and realize, all the different innumerable varieties of bounties that you see in the universe. So it means somebody is trying to get your attention here by presenting all these things to you and giving you these tools to, there's a purpose. Somebody gives you something, you want, they want, you have to appreciate, you have to recognize, you have to realize. So whoever, these are some valuable things that are given to us. So why would our source of existence give these to us? Do we need to just not use them and let them rot away, or do we use them and then use them for a purpose? So that is what the purpose in their creation is being pointed out here. That let me read the sentence. The one who gives them wants to make, the human being aware of every sort of bounty which belongs to him, that he is the giver, provider, or maker of that bounty. And so that the human being gets to know who the provider is, who is the maker of that bounty. So first you get in touch with the bounties, you eat the fruits, you look at the bird, you have to get familiar, acquainted with them. And then you look at their qualities and you wonder what can be the source and who can be the one who gives those qualities to those things. So there is a source of existence that is, is responsible for all these changes and is catching my attention, so that I recognize that source and then I appreciate, that source, and then that's why I would go and offer, he says, constant thanks. So that's why our life is never static. It's always dynamic, so that many opportunities would be presented to us, and we get to know and realize, whoever is presenting, and we should, those are all opportunities for me to be, grateful and being, saying thanks to the owner of the universe, who is presenting all these things to me. So that's why he says, since this is why the reasoning the author puts that, hey, whoever owns you, your being, first of all, these things that are given to you, they're not yours to begin with. They are given to you. My side, my human being, as a human being, I'm using these things, and they are just, freely given, and I use them. So now if I'm given health, and now if I'm, changed and in a different state of lack of health, what am I doing? So do I start complaining, or what? Do I recognize and change my attitude to understand, and hey, wow, this is another aspect of the dynamic universe, that the changes that is continuously happening in the universe, including my being, and it's telling me something, it's fulfilling its purpose. So the human being is able to make sense of every event that they go through. So I will pause here and see if anybody would like to comment, say something, or if this question from the author, which I feel is a kind of a rhetorical question, he says, hey, if you, human being who's reading this, had not suffered this illness in your head or in your hand or stomach, would you have perceived the pleasurable and enjoyable divine bounty of the good health of your head, hand, or stomach? And the additional part I really was amazed at is, and offered thanks. So something is going on. So something is being given, and then this is something that I think we can all ask ourselves. Hey, and we spoke about this extensively, I feel, in this discussion about, looking at the opposites through the spectrum and using our human side and our physical side. As a human being, we recognize and see, that this health that I am given is something that is not mine to begin with, but it has been given. So whoever has given me is also making me experience illness. It's not something that, I can put it that, hey, this thing has given me illness. It's all, everything that is coming into existence is there and for a purpose and fulfilling its purpose. So anybody else wants to comment, add anything? Faria, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought our attention to this rhetorical question, because I was also focusing more on offering thanks, because clearly this last paragraph of the seventh remedy, the author is walking us through the human journey, how we are made. So we are given all these tools, like you were pointing out, Asim, that human faculties, I interact with creation, we experience existence at every moment. We are experiencing it, and we have certain feelings and emotions that are imparted on to us. I mean, these experiences are just a means for us to recognize the existence giver. And so it's all about questioning at the end of the day, what is the purpose of my existence? Why am I made to experience love, compassion, good health? And what is all this for? What is the end goal, or what is the ultimate purpose? And so then the author says that the one that has brought you into existence, really the one that is giving you existence right now, he's making himself known to you, so you become aware of the existence that you're enjoying, because clearly existence hasn't been given haphazardly, or I just don't happen to be in existence out of the blues or randomly. I have been brought into existence. I have been preferred to be given existence. I have not chosen to give myself existence. And so in this human existential journey, it's we all question and investigate what is the true provider of all this that we're experiencing, and then at the end of the day, what is the purpose to all this? And then the author is letting us know is that the existence giver of life is sort of letting us know about who he is, so we get acquainted with him, so to acquaint him with them and to impel him to offer constant thanks. So then we appreciate it. We appreciate not only existence, but the one that is giving us existence. So I think, again, the whole point here is to just be an acknowledgement and to respond back to the one that's giving us bounties. So because every moment we're receiving a message, not like a literal mail or text message coming in, but like a lot of those, we don't even open it. I mean, I have a lot of email, I don't open it, but this universe is just constantly sending us messages. It's just, we're swimming in ocean of messages. but we choose to open the one that catches our attention. And so when something catches our attention, I mean, it means that it was a deliberate setup for me to recognize and offer thanks for all the messages, or the one that has been sending me the message. So yeah, I mean, this whole offering thanks part, I think, is key here. I know we don't have much time, but then even for the author to be mentioning offering thanks, I was also thinking, really, what does it mean to offer thanks, and who am I thanking really? But I think the way this discussion has been flowing, and with all your comments and inputs, I think alhamdulillah, it pretty much makes sense for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Fariha. So yeah, that is perfect. Anybody else would like to add to any comments? We have a few minutes left. And the thing, I think the part about as Suhail also was mentioning about the stages the individual goes through, and he says the gratitude and being thankful is an important aspect that we get to learn from sickness. Interesting how something we always take that something as miserable or something really negative, but then that is all of a sudden becomes an opportunity to be grateful for our the existence of health. So it brings us back to what our position, our reality is. And I think in one of the sections the author also made a difference between active worship and passive worship. So your active worship being your, let's say, 5-time daily prayers, you're actively fasting and recognizing who your Lord is. And then passive is things that, in this dynamic universe, you will go through different stages and you are presented with something. And then these things actually remind you of something that was, something else. That, hey, you've, like, for instance, you're living a healthy life and then you go through a stage of sickness, and now this stage of sickness becomes a reminder for you, hey, all this time, you've been healthy, but you never thought about it. And now this is something that, hey, who is the one who presented this health to me that I never acknowledged? So this is the passive way of, being grateful, recognizing, and then say, hey, thank you. I love that state of my being, that where I can be physically active and do all sorts of things. And, I look for you to provide the healing as well, since you are the one who provides health to me. This is how I recognize that health is yours, and I appreciate that gift that I enjoy in my existence. So yeah, Faria, go ahead.
Just to add on to what you said, actually, it brings us to the conclusion, how the author concludes this seventh remedy. Mashallah, it's very easy to grasp. I mean, this especially part of the text, I mean, it's very practical, as opposed to the other text of the author. The first one, it's a little theoretical, but this piece is more practical. We can apply to it, to our daily experiences. So anyways, what he's mentioning here is that you would have unconsciously spent that good health on heedlessness and perhaps even on dissipation. So again, taking this universe as we're being educated, our spirit is being trained. And so the one that has brought into existence care for us, loves us, and is educating us. So even something that we may dislike at a moment, it's to teach us, so that we don't go on wasting our human qualities, human side, or existence in general on just aimless, futile, no purpose, or just having goals that are just bound to this universe, but rather so we utilize all of our senses and tools for its true purpose, which is to recognize who I am as a created being and who the source of my existence is, or who my Lord is. And so we end up on a grateful and thankfulness note. Thanks.
Thank you, Fariha, for highlighting that last sentence about using all the bounties, all the gifts that we are presented with, and just wasting them. Heedlessness, not recognizing who their owner is, and then just dissipation, wasting their purpose. So it puts us in check, which is a really, we have to be, I think for personally, I'm very grateful that this is how the universe is there and teaching me in every condition that I am put in, as a sign for me to get out of my sleepiness, not recognizing, and then making use of my human side and senses to recognize actually who the source of my happiness actually is, and who is my actual source of health going there. So I think we are at time. If there's any final comment by anyone who wants to say something, please go ahead. Give a few seconds. Mariam Astamir, please go ahead.
Could I share my notes really fast before we close?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So my first note for the sixth and seventh remedy put together was, if you were never sick, you wouldn't understand the pleasure of being healthy. The universe is made in a way where the opposite is what makes the other known. You cannot realize something without having a contradiction. Connect with your creator through sickness. If something is continuous, it loses its effect. Nothing has no meaning. Everything points to him. If you never experience 0% of health. If you did, you'd be dead. You never experience 100% either, because 100% is perfection. There is no absolute perfection in this universe. The absence of something is not pleasurable. The existence of dislike, of non-existence, looks to the existence of love of existence, or in other words, because of our fear or dislike of anything not being existence, makes me realize my love for existence. Every moment we are receiving messages. It is our choice to open them or not. And that was my last note.
Beautiful, mashallah. It's golden, Mariam. Thank you very much for sharing those notes. This was a good summary of our discussion. So inshallah, let's conclude here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim, wa akhiru da'wahum alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha.